In this lesson, we are going to look at how a computer works. To begin with, we'll look at what a CPU is, how it interacts with input and output, what the code you write does in the context of that CPU, and a little about compiling and binary. CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. Essentially, this just is a little chip inside your computer that does the kind of heavy lifting of, well, all the computations that happen. It essentially takes inputs, processes them in some way, and then delivers outputs. So if you open up your little laptop, what you'll find inside, buried among the different bits and pieces, is something called a motherboard. The motherboard is the scaffolding on which much of the circuitry is based, and it provides the plug-in points for the inputs and the outputs. Embedded in that motherboard is the CPU. So let's look at the CPU a little more closely now. It's essentially got three different components in it: the ALU, or arithmetic logic unit, the control unit, and something called the memory unit. So that CPU takes information in the form of inputs from things like a keyboard, performs a bunch of operations on that input, and then makes an output to something like a monitor. So what happens is that code essentially comes in as an input. It first goes to the memory unit, so that's a kind of a temporary place that code is installed. And from there it's read into the control unit. And from there, in the control unit, it's executed. So just one instruction executed. And when that happens, depending on what the instructions say, you'll either get an arithmetic or logical instruction, or an instruction about what memory to access, or where else in that instruction to jump to. When that's all been processed and the full set of instructions have been followed, and what will happen is that each instruction in your code will essentially be read sequentially from start to finish. And when that's been completed, what will happen is that an output will be generated. It's important at this stage to keep in mind that computers only understand ones and zeros, or what's known as binary. So all input is converted to these ones and zeros, and all output is converted from ones and zeros into something else. So here I've got an example of a little Python script, or should we say a schematic example of a Python script, which will just print the words hello. And it will go through a process of what's called compiling or interpreting, in which those instructions that are readable to humans is converted into ones and zeros, which is understood by the CPU. So in summary, a CPU is a computer component that executes instructions. Code you write instructs the CPU to interact with input and generate output. And computers can only understand ones and zeros, so all code must be translated into ones and zeros.